Welcome back to the Tuesday Weekend, the podcast that only brews a pot of decaf when it is asked for. Breakfast servers get run the hardest for the smallest tips. And what I mean by that is, can I get more coffee? Oh, and a water, no ice. Oh, good, my food is here. Can I get ketchup? Oh, sorry, I need hot sauce too. Oh, hey, my coffee's empty again. And oh, can I get an orange juice now? And then you leave them $2.84 on an $18 check. So first, let me introduce some of you to the concept of a standard minimum tip. It doesn't matter how much the bill is, leave $5 per person. So if there are 4 of you and your total check is less than $50, I don't think leaving 20 is unreasonable. Does that make your breakfast more expensive? Yeah, sure. Life is expensive. It's expensive for your server too. Heck, I'm tipping $2 for coffee these days. So, Nick, thoughts, first of all, just on working breakfast shifts, and then we're going to get to breakfast's cousin, brunch.
Well, first off, most times in most places, I mean, unless they are a specific breakfast place, your breakfast servers are the greenest and the newest servers in the entire building.
Also correct.
They are going to come in. This is where you learn. I mean, it's like as a bartender, you learn bartending on service bar just to get your speed down, just to make drinks. This is where they're learning just how to serve. A lot of people, not all, but a lot of people at breakfast really don't talk that much. They don't ask that many questions. They're just getting up in the morning. They just want to eat something. They want to go. Mm-hmm. They don't realize that they have asked for 15 coffee refills and actually had 15 cups of coffee during breakfast. When you're the server, you're just going like, no one drinks this much coffee at home. It's because they would have to make multiple pots.
Yes.
And at the same time, they're just drinking it, not even realizing it's just like water to them. And secondarily, on the tipping part, no one tips well at breakfast. I've worked breakfast shifts over the years. Not so much brunch, but breakfast shifts. We're talking like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Mm-hmm. It's dollars. You don't see a 5 very often. You see a 5 when there's 2 people.
Right.
You don't see a 5 from someone just sitting down and having like a $20 breakfast, and they'll leave like $2-3, and you're just like, what is this, the 1950s? What did I do wrong?
Exactly. And the problem is, say, like a lunch place, if you're getting low tips, well, if you have a big volume, then that kind of makes up for
you get all those smaller people. Tips. Volume adds it up, and you just turn and burn. I mean, your service is minimal. You're literally walking out. What do you want? Here's your food. Here's your check.
Maybe you refill the soda, but that's about it. Whereas, really, for breakfast, that server is going to be going to and from the table. Count it next time you go out to breakfast. 10 times minimum, probably more, especially if it's a bigger table. There's so many more things to do in a breakfast shift that I really do not think most diners understand. But really, next time you go out for breakfast, watch your server and see all of the things they have to do. And not to say that dinner servers don't get run, because they certainly do. You know, that side of ranch is always waiting there for table 13. But they really do work so hard, and they get tipped so poorly. So please, my request to you, and not even as somebody who works breakfast themselves, but just when you go eat out, leave more than a 10% tip for breakfast.
Yes, please. There's a very famous movie scene in the movie Reservoir Dogs, where they are sitting around. They obviously have just finished breakfast. Steve Buscemi's character, Mr. Pink, if you watch the whole scene, is like holding his coffee cup up, trying to get more coffee, and he just never does. Like in the entire scene, like he's basically being ignored by the server. And then when they say, let's pay up, hey, throw some money in for tip, and he's like, I ain't tipping. And they're like, well, he's like, I don't believe in tipping. He's like, I come in and these people expect that I should give them a certain amount of money every time I sit down. He's like, I'm not doing that. And they get in this big argument about it. But the argument is preempted by the fact that he is literally in the entire scene when he's not talking and the waitress walks by, he's holding his coffee cup up. He's like saying, pointing at it. He's just, hey, can I get some more coffee? And then when they say tip and he's like, no. I mean, yeah, if your service is bad, sure, get it.
Sure. But if your service is not, tip
it's like you're at a place for breakfast in the morning, trying to wake up, trying to get ready for your busy day. Well, guess what? The people who are there have been there 2 hours before you, getting ready for you to get ready for your busy day, and then still trying to put a bright face on. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? And I mean, dude, back in Utah when I worked breakfast, I'd be driving through 3 feet of snow to get to work to serve breakfast, and we would be packed.
And the servers that can manage a busy breakfast with a smile on their face, props to you. That is not a skill that I have. I
Not
have,
at all.
I can be downright rude at night, and that's when I'm fully awake. So I really don't think me being a breakfast server would be that great an idea. I mean, there certainly have been times where I have worked breakfast and brunch in the kitchen, and in fact, there were a couple months towards the end when I was living in New York where I would work Friday night dinner shift, sleep about 4 hours, work Sunday brunch at the sister restaurant, get a couple-hour break, then work dinner service at my regular one, then go back for Sunday brunch. Now, thankfully, I didn't have to work that Sunday night shift because I was dead at that point.
Now, another part of breakfast, and I had to work this, was work at a sports bar Saturday night with all the sports, and then that sports bar converts over to basically a nightclub because it's a bar. So it's just playing loud music and playing until, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and then come back at 8 in the morning to set up the bar for Sunday football and work through that shift and literally just get less than 2, 3 hours of sleep. That was one of the mornings I would eat breakfast just because my body's like, what's going on? Like, I need food. It's going to be a long day again. And then you just get right back into it. And this is something that's different. All these people who come in for football, all these people who come in to eat breakfast on sports bars on breakfast, they tip great. Everyone's fantastic. Everyone's happy. Same people come in Monday and then have breakfast and they tip you $2 on, 30.
One of the busy places that I managed in New York City was the Sarah Beth's on Central Park South, which is just a huge brunch place. And those weekend brunches, we would probably do about 900 covers on a Saturday and 1,000 on a Sunday. And I'm sure it was a big dining room. We could accommodate, I think, about 180 people at any time. But still, if you're hitting 1,000, that means you are turning those tables over and over again.
Yeah.
And love to those omelet cooks, because those are some of the most professional, just breakfast guys that I've ever worked with. But the bartender, one of those busy brunch shifts, I remember after tipping out the food runners, the bar back, and the bussers, was still walking out with $500 in her pocket. Oh, yeah. And there I was as a manager making my salary $120 for the day. And she basically pops a bottle of champagne, pours a little off the top, takes the orange juice, like replaces it, and hands me the bottle. And it's like, thanks, boss. You worked your ass off today. And it's like, well, I appreciate you at least acknowledging it. And also, that is my favorite mimosa recipe. So
that's a proper recipe.
On the subject of mimosas, also, the math on mimosas really made all of my, not just my liquor sales math work out, but food costs in general. If you run a restaurant and you don't have a liquor license and you don't do brunch, try to correct both of those things, because that's all right. I'm not saying redo your entire restaurant. If that's not what you do, that's not what you do. But also, there's money to be made in that shift.
Yeah, I worked brunch at a very, very nice restaurant in Salt Lake. And there was a lot of rules, just stuff that we had to do. For example, I would make my own Bloody Mary mix. Mm-hmm. I actually have the Bloody Mary recipe from the John Wayne bar from the Honolulu airport from the 60s, which was a huge bar for the Rat Pack during the jet set days. It's got 22 ingredients. It takes 2 days to make because you have to let it sit and ferment a little bit. And I would make 2 gallons of that, and the first gallon would be drank by the staff every Sunday brunch morning with no liquor, myself included. Wow. Coming in and just pouring a glass and being like, oh. Secondarily, when we got to this same restaurant, the dishwashers would take all of the fish stuff from the mongers on Sunday mornings and make ceviche.
Oh, sweet.
So we had fresh halibut yellowtail ceviche. I mean, like in like a glass like this. They would hand you a 16-ounce water glass of ceviche when you walk in. It's like, okay, cool, breakfast. Throw the music on and go. We would make our mimosas, just the splash, like you said. We did something a little different. They literally had Orange Crush on the soda gun for brunch, and you would put a splash of Orange Crush in your mimosa.
I'm willing to try that.
A little bit of sweetness, a little bit more effervescence, because anytime you add juice to champagne, the bubbles just go away. And you've made a bad mimosa when it's not bubbly at all. That means you put too much of whatever in the champagne, but this would brighten it up a little bit and be like, you make the best mimosas. You make the best. I mean, those Bloody Marys, after I started baking them, we would open at 9, and if you weren't there by 10, they were probably gone.
Sure.
And it would be everybody who we waited on the night before, because we were kind of a nighttime bar, fine dining place that would close at 11 or 12, and people were going out to the bars. They would show up the next morning still in the same clothes from the night before. All the club girls and guys are showing up getting Bloody Marys and mimosas and having breakfast. And it's just like, eggs Benedict on a searing hot plate. That was my biggest memory, is that on any other day, it was fine. Sundays, you needed a towel. If you weren't a cook, you needed a glove. The one time I had it and I was like, hey, this is hot. Please don't touch. This guy just grabs it out of my hand and puts it down. And I'm like, what? He's like, I'm a steel worker. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're used to that. That's how hot it was.
One thing I want to talk about from all my experience working in the kitchen, there was a joke that really, it's funny because it's true. And that is, when you pan up bacon to cook it, you always pan up twice as much as you need. So when you burn the first tray, you've got that second one ready to go. But I want to spend a moment here to talk about how I like to cook bacon, both at work and at home. And that is at about 280 degrees for 35 to 45 minutes. And yes, I know that is a long time, but it renders the fat out perfectly. Every so often, flip them and you pour off the rendered fat. And yes, here you will really get to see how much added water your meat packer is putting into their pork bellies. But once you get all that fat rendered out, it is not hot enough to burn the bacon. So you get it just that perfectly crisp, the way I like it every time. And yeah, it takes longer, but it's worth it.
I got some free time coming up, so I'm probably going to try that now. It's like, I'm going to make a lot of bacon tomorrow.
And I usually crank some black pepper and a little garlic powder on my bacon too, but it's not necessary. I just like it.
That sounds.
And then the other kitchen story about breakfast that I really want to make sure I include is, I once almost quit a pretty decently paying sous chef gig over the consistency of the oatmeal. And that's because it was a continental breakfast line for a private membership club. And one of the members liked it very runny, and one of the members liked it super stiff. And they both came in at the same time one morning, and they both complained to the GM that I'm not even getting the oatmeal right. But then thankfully, about a week later, I was sent out on a special mission to Tennessee for an emergency. And that was really never a problem for me again. But I was close to just walking out the door over oatmeal. Yeah, these grouchy old men had nothing better to do than complain about the oatmeal.
And this goes back to the low tipping on breakfast. There is no other shift in the front of the house in a restaurant that has more substitutions, changes, requests than breakfast. People are asking, oh, can you replace the black beans in your dish with rice? And it's like, we don't even have rice right now. We haven't cooked. I mean, it'll take a while. Sure. I mean, and it's just outlandish stuff that everyone's got their breakfast kink, and that's what I'm going to call it. And they want that when they go out to eat. I mean, I'm sure those hash browns have to be cooked a certain way. The bacon has to be cooked a certain way.
Oh, geez. Exactly. When my mother would order breakfast, she likes her hash browns extra well done, her bacon crispy, her eggs, need to be cooked all the way through. If you think people are particular about their hamburger orders, you have never worked a breakfast shift.
No.
Because, you can have a plate of food where every object on that plate has its own specification of how they want it cooked.
You go out to a six top and they all order the same thing, and you've still got 2 pages of notes just on bacon, eggs, and toast. Yeah. They want different toast. Some want butter.
I like my toast dark. Someone else likes their light.
Exactly. Yeah. And people are very passionate and fiery about how their breakfast is cooked.
Yep.
You bring out a breakfast that's wrong. Where's the manager? This is an aberration. I can't believe you're even open. And you're just like, man, it's 6:15 in the morning, dude. Please go be angry with someone else.
I will say one other quick anecdote about my time from Sarah Beth's. Again, Central Park South, and we had a sidewalk patio area or looking out over the park. And the first day in the spring that got above 50 degrees, the owner would open up that patio And yeah, your eggs are already cold. By the time
Yeah.
it takes the eggs to get from the door to your table, it's only
They're
20
cold.
feet, but
Yeah.
they're cold because eggs have no ability to retain heat.
There's a brunch place right down the street. I'm probably going to go there today just because I'm feeling like a little bit of brunch, but it's indoor outdoor. And I usually sit at the bar, which is also indoor outdoor. And if it's breezy at all, I mean, that breakfast carbonara comes out, or the steak and eggs comes out. And I mean, it's a mission to eat that as fast as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the other things that people don't realize, front of the house and back of the house too, about breakfast, is that your breakfast shift is going to do 200 covers, which isn't a lot, but when your dinner shift is only going to do 100, and yet the dinner shift sales are going to be triple.
Yeah, exactly. Just from the menu prices.
Yeah, just from the menu prices. But people who eat breakfast, they eat. I mean, there's no phones out, there's no pictures, they're done and they're out, but they want all of that, everything done in like a 35-minute period. Perfect.
Oh, sure. Well, because most of those items are pretty quick to cook.
Yeah.
Especially if you're properly prepped and all of the longer taking things that, so it really should not take very long, but sometimes it's just busy.
Yeah, especially when the people come in. I had the privilege, I guess, of waiting on an actor named William Atherton. You might know him from Ghostbusters as Mr. Peck. You might know him as the professor from Real Genius. You might know him as the heel reporter from Die Hard.
Oh, yeah.
He is not acting at all. And this was another 6:01 in the morning. I'm not a breakfast person. I'm not a morning person. And he started off on me on the jump. I walk up, how you doing this morning, sir? And he's like, well, it'd be a lot better if you poured me some coffee already. And I'm like, let me go get that for you. Well, I'm ready to order. And I'm like, do you want coffee or do you want to order? I mean, I was in the mood to just lean into this instead of back away. I'm like, oh, sorry, sir. I'm like, nope, I don't care. I'll lose a job over this asshole. I don't.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, I am hungover as hell. It's 6:05 in the morning. I've been here since 5, and this guy has already given me shit.
I will die on this hill.
Just went through the whole breakfast, and he complained the entire time, and he was reading a script. And I'm just like, oh, or you're reading a script for a movie? And he's like, well, yeah, that's what they call them. And I'm like, okay, cool. Is it similar to your other characters that you played? Because I mean, he was kind of surprised I knew who he was. And I'm like, like I named those movies off, and he's like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, then, dude, you nailed it, because they wrote that. They wrote that character in that script for you, because if anyone who wants an over-officious prick to be in their movies, you are their guy.
There you go.
He's like, what did you just call me? And I'm like, I didn't call you a thing. I said the characters that you play in these movies are pricks, and that you do them phenomenally. I mean, there could be a separate Oscar category for such a big a prick you can play in a movie.
Yep.
And he knew at that point that he could complain, but I didn't really call him or say anything. And I was actually praising him for his acting ability.
Yeah, right. It's like
one of the funnest moments of my life to see just the defeat in his eyes, going like, what do I owe you?
Yep.
$30.
I think we're going to take another quick break here, and then we will get back and talk more about breakfast foods. So stick with us.